My talk this morning is about complete streets, is about urban spaces, but it's also about where we're headed. In this sense, the way to San Jose. Every city outside of Silicon Valley in the United States, in the free world, wants to become San Jose, wants to become Silicon Valley, Silicon Alley, Silicon, mountains, Silicon this. But in point of fact, when you think about it, there are two San Joses, and both of them relate to the topic of discussion today. First of all, welcome to San Jose. This is the site you see. It's beautiful, it's lovely, it's warm, it's inviting. Behind every tree there's an entrepreneur just about to make another $1 million. This is the way we see San Jose often in the evening. But to the urbanist, that's what they see. Go back for a second. See those trees? Go forward. Those are walls. There's nothing there except for a streetscape that you can drive a car down. This is the actual streets in Silicon Valley. This is what happens in Cupertino, up and down the peninsula. To say that it's 60 feet across, that's being comfortable. They can go up to 72, 84, 90. What does that really feel like when you're walking across that street? And I've always wanted to be on a camel, so I added that. But that's what it feels like. You're crossing a desert. It's hot. It's open. It's miserable. Worse, it could feel like Frogger. Dangerous, inherently dangerous. What is it we should do in this given circumstance? We should make the streets complete, they say. This is my quick little poem, and it starts off with a tribute to local director of Real Artways, Will Wilkins. Will talked about places to do nothing, and here in Hartford, we don't have any places to do nothing. Our streets connect our institutions. I'll talk about in a few minutes related to the iQuilt, but our streets are our connective places. If you go back and think about that street in San Jose, you're not hanging out there for more than 2 minutes. You hang out there for the least amount of time before you can get inside from where you are. You don't want to be there. Well, in point of fact, what we want to do through this idea of complete streets, through this idea of new urbanism, it's called, or traditional neighborhood design, we want to create public spaces where you want to be, where you enjoy being. They are someplace. They're not no place. You want to make it someplace to be when you're out on the sidewalk that you enjoy standing there. They're a multimodal space. They are for pedestrians. And it's always true that every driver becomes a pedestrian at some point. So you need to keep both in mind. And in point of fact, for right now, and where we live today, we're not going to see the car go away tomorrow. So you need to prepare for the car too. But you need to prepare for that auto and that bike, for the grandmother and for the tyke. But most of all, and I do mean the stroller, not just the baby stroller, the person who is wandering, the person, to use Will's phrase, who's doing nothing. This is the person we want to encourage and be able to have a happy time on our sidewalks and spaces. I'll get in a second to what it really means. But the point here in terms of before execution, in terms of physical design and layout when you get engineers involved, is we want to create spaces like this. Spaces that feel comfortable to be in, spaces that are warm. Because, very importantly, we think right now, as urbanists in the United States, that this attracts the creative class, the creative mind. We believe by creating public spaces and environments which encourage walkability, which encourage bicycle riding, which encourage overall quality of life, that this will attract a creative economy, which will lead to a better job culture, a better progress, innovation, all those pieces. So to what end? As I've said, it's about creating places. Okay, placemaking is not trademarked, but it might as well be. We now do it as a matter of course. If you look around on the East Coast, you're going to find placemaking to be the topic of conversation from Toronto to DC, from the Inner Harbor in Baltimore to Downtown Crossing in New Haven. All of these projects are about getting people to live back at scale, not having people live in giant towers surrounded by dead lawns with a gigantic freeway right next door. Instead, we like to live essentially in urban villages. That's what we're discovering. That's what we're discovering is popular. And as I was saying, we think that leads to innovation, growth, and progress. We think it leads to Silicon Valley. We think it leads to the Gilded Age of Hartford, when we were the industrial breadbasket of the United States. We believe that these things are connected, and so we're pursuing this course of action, this idea that if we actually create good urban spaces, and we start with the public realm, that we can actually move our economy forward. Deputy Secretary for the Economic Development in Connecticut, Keith Bergstrom, is known to say that great art, meaning really nice, beautiful places, creates great places. You need creative class. And these create talent, and these create jobs, and this will move this state and any other state or any other city along. So, what is this thing I've called the complete street? It's simple. This graphic is a little tough up at this scale, but what you can see is every single type of modality, walking, biking, hanging out in a vanagon in the middle of the street, parking illegally in your VW Bug, all of these have a space on the street. And they're all separated by nice tree belts. They're separated so that they're safe. Way back, not just 10 years ago, less than that, 2008, there was a report called Dangerous by Design, published by a series of nonprofits that started talking about how our highway system, our street system, by not separating the modalities of transit, was creating dangerous road conditions, inherently dangerous road conditions in the United States, and it needed to change. So what does it look like, this need for change? This is a vision in San Francisco. I mean, don't you just want to hang out there, right? It's a lovely place. There's people doing all sorts of things. I think there's a hidden bocce court somewhere along that street. This is the sort of vision. But it's not just in the Silicon Valley type San Franciscos and Bostons and New Yorks. It's also in Mississippi. This is occurring across the country. Just simply adding a shrubbery belt. Leave this building here. Walk over to Trumbull Street. Stand on Trumbull Street and see what that feels like. Versus go out onto Main Street, okay, in front of Bushnell Towers, and you're going to see a dead wall and a 60-foot, 70-foot street, and it's going to take you forever, and any turtle's going to get killed when it goes across the road. Whereas if a turtle crosses Trumbull Street, it's going to have a nice little place to stop and get watered and get some food as it eats the plants in the middle of the street. This is what you can do when you're actually thinking about a street that is complete. A street that is a place, not just something you have to get through to move cars at high speeds till someplace better comes along. Now, it's no good talking about a subject like this without talking about the coolest thing in it. And the coolest thing that struck me is always this thing called a road diet. Now, a road diet, okay, is just shrinking of roads. You see here, you got an existing 4-lane. You bring it down to a 3-lane, and you bring it down to another 3-lane. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Because we overbuild our roads. Literally, build it, they will come is a word that the New York highway system should have invented. Because every time they built a new bridge or a new road, all it did within a week and a half of it being built was it hit capacity. Our highway system, the more we build it, the more they will come and they will fill it, and you'll be in a traffic jam again. You're just going to wait a couple of years. The idea behind the road diet system is to actually shrink it, to start forcing people to start thinking about their safety on the road, the speed at which they're traveling, what routes they should be taking, and maybe just also encouraging other ways of transit. Bicycle, public transit, etc. Dedicated bus lanes. So for me, the road diet, which is something that is critical to the project here in Hartford called the iQuilt, is something that, well, that's the coolest word in there, in the whole lexicon. So as I said to you, it is actually official. Once they published Dangerous by Design, they actually, the group, the nonprofits, started meeting with Secretary Ray LaHood. And this just isn't a bunch of wonks and urbanists and urban planners and people who ride bikes who like this. I'm all three. But it's also official federal policy. Secretary LaHood in 2010, in March, published this policy. Now you'll notice at the same time, I've modified it a little because I think it's not only in the third line just for the federal government, it's for all of us in our chairs. This is something we all can be advocating for and thinking about. But we've got the backing of the federal government, which isn't bad to have. And so now, oh, the picture disappeared. I don't know where the picture went. Well, I'm going to move on from there. And the picture's also gone. iQuilt. If you look at Hartford, what you see is you see a green space coming from the Capitol that dies at the edge of Bushnell Park. What we're talking about doing in this city with iQuilt is we're talking about connecting our institutions, the Wadsworth, the library, Mortensen Plaza, and actually connecting them in between with good public spaces. Some of these public spaces are not owned by the public. Some of them are owned by travelers or the Phoenix or other people, and they're right now already underway to do it. Inherently, though, in the iQuilt is not just a pursuit of this idea because it's good or it's nice or it feels pleasant, but because it's about encouraging our cultural institutions and strengthening them. It's also about encouraging innovation. We believe that by pursuing a course of action that creates better public spaces, better walkability, better bike routes, that we can increase our visitation, the tendency of people to want to hang out in the downtown. Compare downtown Hartford with hanging out, let's say right now, in downtown West Hartford, and you got it in a second. We want to be doing that, but adding in the phenomenal world-class institutions that we have in Hartford to this mix. And then we feel when we do this, we're going to be able to, at the same time, foster our economic development and attract more jobs. Now, we also don't think that you can just build it, they will come in this instance. It's different. When you start working on complete streets and walkability in places people haven't been before, you need to drag them in. Jane Jacobs famously said, people don't want to be in downtowns, you have to put them there. This is from Jane Jacobs. So what has been happening in Hartford has been creating things like Winterfest and Vision Fest and downtown signage. The ways in which to improve access, education, and events in the city that will bring people to enjoy these spaces. Why should we have to do that? Because people already have an opinion of places like Hartford. You have an opinion about Newark, I bet. You get an opinion about Trenton. Okay? You also have an opinion about New York City. And you'll walk 30 blocks in New York City, you'll never walk 6 in Hartford. What's the difference? Scale, activity, events, people, things like that. So if we bring them in, it's our hope that we're going to be able to create that sort of active environment. So what we have here are streets. We have connection. It is the spaces between places. We want to make those spaces between places, places that you want to be. That's what a complete street is about. That's about the work of the iQuilt in Hartford. But most of all, I go back to Dangerous by Design. Complete streets are safe streets. Safe for every type of use. And that can't be forgotten even when we think about the economic development activities. Thank you very much.